Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I'm Daniel Chamberlain here with Kenny Simpson. Coach, spring ball, yours is done. I'm halfway point. I don't think that I've ever smiled more in my life just at a random week in the middle of the spring. It's my first spring ball as a coach in year 5, just because. And man, I am having an absolute blast. Just out running around, practice, coaching kids, install. It's all there. So I haven't quit smiling since last Monday.
Oh, yeah. Now, there's a couple parts of the season that have always been my favorites. Usually the spring and the summer I actually enjoy. At that point, there's not a ton of pressure. I mean, unless you're just doing things wrong, you're kind of winning all the time, because you're playing yourself most of the time and you're building towards something. Everybody's undefeated. Nobody's gotten beat yet. So usually optimism is high, or if it's not, there's lots of problems. It should be kind of high in those moments. It gives you a chance to kind of slow down. And then, of course, playoff season. Those are the 2 seasons for me that are generally my favorites. Not that I don't mind regular season too, but there's something about spring and summer where you're getting to see new kids and trying to figure out who can play where, the challenge of it as a coach. I think a lot of us really enjoy that, where, when you're in season, you try to enjoy it, but really, it's so long, it's hard to really enjoy those times.
Yeah, very monotonous too, right? It's just, we talk about practice shells and keeping things the same so kids know what's coming and they can get the most out of it, being efficient, but eventually, you're kind of not problem solving anymore, right? You're not. Yeah. There's not any change. It just gets that monotony picks up. So
your best chance for growth is, it was during the off season in the weight room. Now in the spring and the summer, where you're trying to really work on skills and kind of teach different things. You get into the middle of the season, that's why those poor kids that show up like August 4th, they better be really good. Because you're at that point, you're trying to get scheme in so much. It's hard to develop the skill aspect of it, because you may have a game in 2 weeks, and you better be able to make sure you get 11 guys that can line up, and do what they're supposed to do. So spring's always been fun for me. We had our spring game, just did an inter squad, and we tell our kids all the time, and as I've gotten older, I've actually enjoyed it. It used to make me so mad. We have spring, or like everybody else, we have kids doing track and baseball and soccer, and we want them to be successful. When I was young, that used to drive me nuts that we wouldn't have all our kids there. Or you have a kid that, we're out of school pretty much, and so they had vacation planned, and so that could be frustrating. But to me, I've kind of looked at it more as this is an opportunity to work with kids you're probably not going to spend a lot of time with once the season comes. So we try to use spring for new players, guys that are in new spots, and then for our upcoming 10th graders, which in Arkansas, that's the youngest level of varsity. So your kind of next class that's coming into senior high football, and focus on those kids. And I think we've got a special. We got about 25 of them, and man, they'll kind of, like you said, they give you a lot of energy coming up there, just excited to learn football. It was a lot of fun.
Yep, I've had a blast. Just the install has been great. Like I said, it's my first spring, and plus it's my first time as an OC, so I'm kind of getting to switch sides of the ball and troubleshoot from there. So it's been a ton of fun. I can definitely see where a year from now, when more of the kids know the base package, right? So it's not complete install. I'm not teaching coaches how to coach these positions in this scheme. It'll be a lot more fun. Right now, I'm kind of running around like chicken my head cut off, trying to be – you try to put that information out there for your position coaches to be able to do their job, but they still don't have all the answers, right? And so it's still – you end up coaching a lot of the positions. Are y'all going to do a team camp? Do y'all have anywhere you're going this spring as a team?
This summer, we do several. So in Arkansas, you can have 7 competition days. So we get to go, whether that's a 7-on-7 or like a padded team camp. We're actually going to host, our first one will be June 5th, and then we're going to try to host one a week, whether it's a camp or a 7-on-7 or whatever it might be. So we'll end up hosting about 7 all throughout the summer. But that's a much more accurate view of your team probably than spring is, because spring, you're going against yourself. So someone looks good and someone looks bad, but you don't know if it's the level of competition or what it might be. Where a team camp for us is much more accurate view of here's how we look against another team, especially if we know they're a competitive quality opponent. Gives you more of an idea.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do inter squad or intra squad, I suppose, intra squad, and you're just not going to get the best look. And that's same as practice every day, right? It's generally not ones on ones, and so if you're limited, the best 11 are on the field at a team camp or something. I think we're going to skip team camp this year. We just got a lot of kids. The vacation thing hit us too, right? About that time. And we're just such low numbers. And in the first year in the new scheme, I think we're going to avoid, that extra chance for an injury or something ridiculous. And we'll just wait until we get into the fall and get to those scrimmages, I guess, if you will. So, man, yep, having a ton of fun. Spring ball's been a blast. Tonight we came to talk a little bit about game planning, which hopefully you're not doing any of in spring ball. Hopefully just go out there and calling some plays and having fun and coaching fundamentals. But, the fall is not too far away. Season starts in 4 months or something. So we're right there at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we'll talk a little game plan tonight, mainly for an odd front team. And I'm sure we'll stick to a lot of run schemes. I guess it doesn't have to be, right? An all run game, but very interested to see how you handle odd front teams versus even front. And, maybe we'll do even front another night, but a super balanced defense is one that, it's hard to get hats and it's hard to get numbers on them because they're just as balanced as you are. So I'm excited to hear how you're handling that. Before we talk about it, though, you mind telling us some ways we can simplify football for ourselves, our staff, and our team? This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Dell in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com. What's up, coaches? I want to talk to you for just a few moments about your program. The longer I'm in this profession, the more I understand that efficiency is truly the name of the game. We're talking offense, defense, doesn't matter, right? Eventually, you're going to come down to checking out your efficiency. So I have to ask you, are you doing everything in your program the most efficient way, right? Are you fundraising the most efficient way? Are you representing your players and your program to the public in the best way? Are you planning to build the facilities the most efficient way? If you answered no to any of those, or really even if you answered yes to all of them, and you haven't contacted Mark Bridges at Ace Sports, you're missing a key step. So look, Mark and his team, they are the go-to group for video board and scoreboard installations for your school. They're not just football either. Mark can help you mock up your newest video board for that new stadium, or maybe even your old stadium, right? That's where Mark and the guys come in. And we're not just buying a flashy thing, right? Yes, it's nice. It's pretty neat to have that big scoreboard, that big video board, but you're also, you're investing back into that program. You're investing into that newest fundraiser. Sure, you can keep selling your discount cards, your beef jerky, hosting pie auctions, whatever it is that you like to do. But let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. We're not making enough money for those big ticket items. For the big ticket items like turf, an indoor facility, that's where you need a big ticket item fundraiser. That's what Ace Sports is offering you today. Guys, I've talked to Mark several times now, all right? And it always comes down to big school, small school. Right? Well, of course, the big schools can afford that new video board, but the small schools really can't. It's just not true anymore, man. Your school isn't too small, and I promise. Okay, 1A, 2A schools, it doesn't matter. Mark and the guys, they're helping them out. Contact Mark today at mark.bridges@acesports.com and let him come give you a quote. Let him show you and your administration the plan. Now, really, it's the cheat code, right? Let him show you the cheat code that is fundraising with Ace Sports video boards. Tell him Daniel sent you.
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials, and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecordinatoracademy.com, all things offense. and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
Awesome. As always, guys, we want you to reach out and talk to people that we bring on as sponsors for the podcast. So we've got Mark and Ryan's the Oklahoma rep. So if you're in Oklahoma, listen to this. Reach out to him. If you need a video board, that's the guy. Those are the guys that I'm pushing through for my quarterback club right now at a new school. Right, we're in need of a video board. I just think it's a cheat code in fundraising, and just seeing the numbers that other schools have pulled in, it's kind of ridiculous that people don't go and try to do that. So, and plus, this is the day and age of technology and digital, making your kids look good and sharing information and highlights, et cetera, et cetera. So, you might as well reach out and get one of those boards put in so you can celebrate your team. Coach, I know the coach's cap, right? Coach's cap still for sale.
It is. They've gone well. A lot of guys are buying them for their staff now. So over there at Coaches Cap, CoachsCap.com. So if you want to get like a staff rate, you can. I think it's set up on the website there, or email me and I'll take care of you. But you can tell you and I got a little red. I was good when I'm coaching, but then I was out at the lake. And then I decided to play a little 7-on-7 football, so I did it to myself, not wearing the hat. So that's been good for us. Coach's Cap's been going really well.
Yeah, I will admit I spent the first week without a hat because we just had dreary, rainy, crappy days, and I was like, I'm not wearing a hat. And then we're a small homestead here, so we're putting our garden in finally. It's like May 19th, and I'm finally putting a garden in the ground. But it's just been one of those springs, so been out moving dirt around on that, and man, yeah, I got pretty red, so got to start taking care of that for sure. O-Line Academy, when does that?
O-Line Academy ought to be coming out next week. We're hopefully after Memorial Day is kind of where we're wanting to launch it. So the Offensive Line Academy, I'll have the website for us probably next week when we go through this type of stuff. But basically, it's going to be about 15 hours or so of all the basics of coaching the offensive line. So it'll come with a digital workbook, and then we'll walk through the workbook, the chapters, how to pick your linemen, how to work gap scheme, how to work zone, all that different stuff that is overlooked. And then, of course, we're going to bring in who I think are some of the best minds in high school football. That's who it's geared towards. Bring those guys in and let them kind of talk about things that they do. Like one will be coaching the undersized offensive linemen. That'll be good. I've got Bo Gould working on gap scheme. So if you're a guy who wants to understand like how to down block, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a really, really good academy. We'll have it out right after Memorial Day, and I'll have some more information kind of coming with that.
Awesome. Speaking of clinics and learning, I want to remind you guys of the Sulphur Strong Coaches Clinic. We are putting that on. It'll be June 17, 18, 19, and 20. You can buy tickets $20 now. That is the early bird pricing, so prices will go up as we get closer. I don't have a date that it goes up just yet, so I wouldn't risk it. I would just jump over and get that $20 ticket. That's a heck of a deal for the staff we put together. Coach Simpson's going to be one of the ones talking. Joe Daniel, if you listen to the other podcast, you'll hear him. Bill Blankenship's going to come on and talk. I've got Adam Gaylor. I've got a ton of DCs, OCs, head coaches, just kind of all over the place. So I basically just reached out to the guys that I've learned the most from. That's where I started this clinic. And so far, it's just ended up being an outstanding cast. So I'm hoping you guys will jump over there, sulphurstrong.coachesclinic.com. You can sign up there. Like I said, I think the tickets are $20 now. They will be going up to around that $35 mark at some point. So, almost doubling your price. So I would get over there and get signed up. It will be, replay is available for like a year. So if you can't attend those dates and watch it live, that's okay. You can still catch the replays.
Now, money you're raising, what are you putting it towards? Just kind of sending it there to like a certain church, or what are you kind of doing with it?
Yep. So we've so far been highlighting the school itself. So okay. I'm still waiting on info to come back to me on exactly what the situation is. And before we'll do it, I'll drive down. It's near my family anyway. So we're going to be working with the school itself and then with probably the mayor and get a hold and see what they have that it can accept donations from a nonprofit. And I will never touch the money. That's a big part of fundraising. You don't ever want to have hands on the money because I shouldn't. It's not doing it for me, right? I'm doing it for them. So whatever they need. I know for a while all their school buses, I believe, are damaged because they had to have local schools help them get to like track meets.
Mm-hmm.
As we get into 7-on-7 and all that for the football team, I'm sure they'll have to continue borrowing buses. They were out of school for a week or two. Just everything got stopped. I still haven't heard if it was one or two tornadoes, but the original story was first tornado came in, did a bunch of damage, and when the search and rescue teams went out to help get people out of destroyed buildings, a second tornado came through and hit them. So the town was pretty decimated. So just whatever they need. That's what the money's going to, is just whatever they prioritize. So that's what we're looking at. Appreciate your efforts. Anybody that wants to go over and donate, that's awesome. Buy a ticket, buy one for your staff, whoever, but just trying to get money to the town of Sulphur, Oklahoma. Jumping into the questions here, Coach. So like we said, we're talking a little game planning of an odd front team, but first I think we have to just ask, what is an odd front team?
Well, we define an odd front team, and it can be different. We run a unique offense, so we see teams that they would call themselves a four-front team, but when they play us, it looks more like an odd front, or they're an odd and they look like an even when they play us. So how I define an odd front team is exactly what it sounds like. Do you have three defensive linemen or guys that are basically playing either right off the tackle's edges, or if we have a tight end, off the tight end's edge, or do you have five? 3 or 5 would be odd. And then 4 obviously would be an even number, or 6 would be an even number. So, like, to me, there are a lot of multiple teams what you see, but that's how we're going to kind of identify that. If you have essentially a guy pretty close to head up our center, and then you've got 2 tackles and then maybe 2 outside linebackers, we'd call that a 5 front. And that can look like a 3-4 or a 5-2, probably depending on the look. We run a 3 front defense. And so I know we have the ability to be in a 3 front and quickly shift down to a 4 front. So I know that defenses can be multiple, but for the sake of this, we'll kind of call that an odd front. And then we look at, there's 2 kinds of 3 fronts. Like, our specific defense is a very movable front. We're trying to put 11 kids on the field that run a 4.9 or under at the high school level and turn them loose. And so we're going to have smaller defensive linemen. We're going to ask them to kind of move gaps, move post-snap moving, pre-snap moving, given different looks. We're doing that out of necessity. We have a lot of speed on our team. We don't have a lot of big bodies. And so that kind of fit what we wanted to do anyway. So we would be considered like a moving 3-4 team. Then you have, like, a lot of people call it the mint or the tight or the bear or whatever front, 3 front, where basically you're going to take those. Generally, you're going to take 3 bigger players and either ask them to 2 gap, where the nose will be head up the center and he's responsible for both A gaps, or the 2 D tackles will be responsible for B and C gap. Generally, those are bigger players. Usually that defensive front is not going to be a moving front. They're going to rely on size and technique to fit gaps. So those are different types of looks, but both are a three front team. And I think the general goal, at least for us, is we're trying to get as much speed on the field as possible, whether that's speed up front or it's 8 skill players. You think about, if you have a 4 front, you have 4 defensive linemen. I'm not saying that they're not athletic, but generally speaking, a outside linebacker is going to be more athletic than a defensive end or another defensive tackle even. And so going to a 3 front allows you to put 4 DBs and 4 linebackers on the field. And again, traditionally, those guys are a little bit faster than a defensive lineman. So I think the goal of the 3-4 was to go ahead and get as much speed as you could on the field. There are some issues. So when you get into the 3-4, here's things that we're looking at. I'm going to talk about it from the defensive standpoint first. So hopefully this will make sense when we talk about offense here in a little bit. But usually running a 3-4 is going to require you to have 2 really good outside linebackers. Those are going to have to be, generally you want them to be bigger, stronger kids that can also run. And that can be hard to find at a high school, And then it's going to require you to have 2 safeties at the top of that. They can play run and they can play pass. And so those tend to be the harder spots to find people. And then usually your nose tackle has to be special one way or another. Really big, can two gap, super athletic, but basically, that kid's going to get double teamed a lot. And so you have to command a double team with that kid for this defense to be successful. If he doesn't, then as an offensive coach, I'm looking at that going, okay, we can block that nose with our center with no help. We feel pretty good about our opportunity to run the ball. So as you're looking at it as an offensive coach, that's who we're looking at. How does their nose look? How do their outside linebackers look? How do their safeties look? And if those guys are all really good, that can be a big problem.
Yeah, I used to define even in odds by like number of people with their hand in the dirt, right? It seemed pretty easy. And then the last 2 years, I've been introduced to this forefront where the outside ends or the D ends are both in a 2-point stance, which please run that. I'm completely okay with that. We're going to kick him to Tomorrowland, but it's what people are doing. It's getting really famous here. The last 3 years, it's been the tight front with walk down backers and this like 5-2 look.
Right.
And now I'm getting a lot of this stand-up defensive end forefront look. So I would say, like, if I were defining a 3-front team, I'm looking at doubles or 2x2, everybody spread out, right? And in that way, who do they have on the line? Because that's what I feel like they want to do. Then if you start adding tight ends, wings, all the attached big guys that can block, you tend to be able to force their hand into having a fourth guy come down or whatever the case is, right? So why are they so much different to block? Why is an odd front so much different than an even front?
In our experience, usually teams that are running an odd front are running a lot more exotic type stuff. And I don't mean that as an insult to forefront guys. Most forefront guys that I have seen tend to rely on like technique over scheme. And I don't mean that as a bad way. I think you can win games doing both. But like you think about like Tampa 2 back in the day where they're sitting in that and they're going to play cover 2 and that's what they're going to do. And there are some forefront teams now with a 3 safety look that are giving you some exotics, but tend to not be as exotic up front. So specifically, I'm talking up front. When you see a 3 front team, you can usually anticipate they can bring 4 linebackers real quickly. Any of those 4 can come, or 2 of the 4 can come, or 3 of the 4 can come. They can come from space and they can be there in a hurry. And then they can even bring a safety if they want to walk them down, and different looks you can get into. So there's a lot of different things you can do. And I'm not suggesting you cannot pressure from a forefront. Of course you can. But in a 3 front, there seems to be just more pieces that can come after you and kind of give you issues. So that can be different, especially if they're relying on speed. And that could be a forefront either way. But if they got fast defensive linemen and they're bringing pressure, it can give you issues if you're a team that's wanting to have big splits on the offensive line and there's issues coming that way. And then you don't really know who's coming off the edge, how are you going to pass protect, that kind of stuff. And so there can be a lot of issues there. So mainly the angles that they're coming with can give you different looks. And then, of course, a lot of times they're willing to run twists and stuff. The other thing that I've noticed a lot with 3 front teams is they can isolate a dominant defensive lineman and almost force your hand to make a really hard decision. So like the tight front defense where they're getting 4 eyes on you and they put that nose right on your center. They almost force your hand in that to either try to down block that 4 eye and get a double team on the center. If you don't do that, you're pretty much going to get a one-on-one block. So it's a good defense to isolate guys. And so sometimes it can kind of mess with your blocking. We like to pull guys, Daniel, you know that. And so you get in those looks. If they got a dominant center, you have to kind of come up with, okay, what are we going to do if we see this guy head up our center and he's shaded to where we're wanting to go? How are we going to handle that? Are we going to not pull guys so we can get our guard to help there? Are we going to try to condense our splits? What are we going to do? And you can do the same thing with your defensive tackles. A lot of times they can take that guy and put him head up your tackle right there and off shade their nose where you're almost like a 1 and a 4 and pretty much get you to block that guy one-on-one. So a good 3-4 guy will kind of get you in those situations where if he's got a dominant defensive player, it can be hard to get a double team there because that front may not be as predictable. Now, Some 3-4 teams are going to be very predictable. You can almost line them up, and that's what they're going to do, and that's not what I'm talking about. There are other 3-4 teams that do a good job of kind of moving guys and getting them in different spots, which can be tough. And then I think the illusion of pressure is a big one too. Like in a 3-4 team, you can give the illusion of pressure by walking up different linebackers in different spots. Our defensive coordinator does a really good job with that, where they're walked up and sometimes they're coming. And then with one little call, they'll jump back as we're in our snap count. And now you're kind of like, well, crap. And so it can be a little more confusing to a defense. Again, I'm not suggesting 4 front teams cannot do this. I'm just saying these are general problems we see with a 3 front team.
Yeah, those Sims and creepers is, kind of, I think those are labeled. Adam Gaylor's actually going to give a clinic over that for the Sulphur Strong Clinic. So, but the Sims and creepers are there for a reason, right? A lot of us have gone to rules-based blocking. If a guy's in my gap, I'm down in. I've even seen, I believe it's your pin pull system, right? Your gap down pull.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pull a puller out of the run fit for the offense just by walking a linebacker down, right? And maybe he bails too late to change rules or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those are big time. I think that the way that I view defensive football, having been the DC for 3 or 4 years or whatever, I constantly wanted to bring 4. That's kind of the standard. If you bring a 5th one, that's a blitz. Right now, we're actually taking someone out of coverage because we want to drop 7. Right? You want a 3 over 4, 2 over 5, whatever your flavor is. We're trying to really get 7 kids into coverage. So a 3 front, obviously they have one extra guy that can come from wherever, right? And that's kind of what you were talking about, those angles and working those. You can send any backer. I love sending a safety. I love to just go cover 3 and let one of my safeties run through B gap, and just let the front and the backers make him right. And that's something, as a run blitz kind of thing. Teams have a hard time answering that. What do you do when this little skill kid's blitzing right up the middle? So, you talked about 3 front teams being able to change or challenge your blocking rules, especially if you want to be a zone team, right? Now I'm, like you said, you're dictating where that double is, and now I'm sending someone through the gap that your uncovered lineman is choosing not to really block. So, lots of stuff there, lots of movement. I think that's what makes them so hard to block, is it challenges your rules in a rules-based blocking scheme. Last question here. What is your thought process for building your game plan against an odd front team?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on what kind of offense that you run. And so I'm just going to give you some general things. And again, don't shoot the messenger here. We run a 3 front team. And so these are things that we have as a defensive staff have to kind of figure out, what are we going to do here? Because the 3 front team, I think it was built to stop the spread. That's where that kind of came around. People were going 4 wide and going empty. And the 3-4 gives you some options there. Where if you're in a 4-2-5, you're going to get a 4-1 box. That's kind of your option. Where we're now able to, in a 3-4, still say a little bit balanced, maybe shade guys one way or another, but it's built to handle empties, spread, 10 personnel. And so to me, we're looking at how can we get them out of their comfort zone. You mentioned it, when you get into a tight end or a tight end wing or maybe an H-back or whatever you call it, when you go a little bit thicker, you kind of force their hand on some alignment rules. So
right.
If we're going to give you a tight end, somebody's got to come down, and so we're going to be able to challenge you. And so we're looking at that as we're watching film. We're looking at, okay, which outside linebacker are they probably going to bring down for me? If I put a tight end in a wing, which that's what we do, what are we going to get? Are they going to try to bring another guy in to match personnel and really kind of change the integrity of their defense? Or are they going to try to keep the guys they have on the field and match me? And then you look at, okay, if that's what they're going to do, what if we shift? What if we line up over here and shift over here? Or what if we go balance with a tight end and an H-back on the other side? Are they going to bring them both down? Then you get into, okay, how are they going to handle trips? Because I think 3-4 teams like balance. You mentioned it. They like to balance things up. So how can I not balance? And there's a lot of versions of trips. It just doesn't have to be 10 personnel. It could be a tight end and two outside, like a tray look. Like that can be an issue for them. Or it could be normal wide trips. Or it could be a tight end, H-back, and a split. Because what you start getting into there is they've got to kind of roll their coverage and get out of what they want to be in and maybe give you a much more clear picture before you snap it. So we look at going, okay, let's go some thicker bodies in there, which I'm going to do that anyway. Then we also look at, okay, how can we give them versions of trips, like several versions of trips. And then if you can combine those two, now you're really cooking. Now I can give them a tight end and twins, like a tray set. To me, that's a 3-4 nightmare. We run the 3-4. That puts it outside linebacker in a ton of conflict. And then how are you going to run that stuff? And so you're trying to look at that. Then we're usually trying to see, are they going to bring one of those two high guys down? And if they are, does he really want to be down? Do they have a safety that wants to come down and come hit us in the mouth? Or are those guys two high guys that are great at playing the pass, but they're not exactly super thrilled about coming down and taking on a fullback or something like that? And so we're going to try to figure out ways to make them either stay too high so we have great numbers, or bring the guy they don't want in the box, be that a corner or a safety. So we're going to try to give them maybe some nub looks, like where you go tight end and you go trips away. And now that corner is there manned up on the tight end. Is he really wanting to run fit? Or what about if we put our running back to the same side as the tight end? Is that linebacker really wanting to cover? So you can kind of, once you go trips away, you can kind of get some favorable stuff back on the backside, or they've got to stay too high and you have really favorable stuff to the trips. So that's why I mentioned trips is kind of a big one for us. Can we make them get out of that two shell? Can we get them out of what they want to be in by formations? So there's a couple different little wrinkles that we usually try to do. I also do a lot of unbalanced. A lot of times 3-4 teams will simply just try to slide their front. The problem becomes on unbalanced. If you leave an eligible player on the backside, they still have to keep a DB over there to handle that. And so even though they've moved their front, they really can't roll their coverage to match the front. So you still end up with favorable matchups to run the ball towards the unbalanced side. Last thing I've got on here is we're going to identify their conflict players. So we're a big RPO team. I think a lot of people know that. We're a big read one defender team in the pass game. So we try to find, okay, who are their conflict players? And conflict to me means this guy is responsible for something in the run game. He's also responsible for something in the pass game. Generally, those are those four best players I mentioned on the first segment. That's the safeties, and that's the outside linebackers. Those guys are generally going to be conflict players, specifically the outside linebackers. Like those are the guys that kind of get stuck in between force and whatever their coverage responsibility might be. So those are really good guys to design passing concepts off of if they're going to stay in zone. If they're going to try to go some man game with you, then I like to run guys off and then run right where they are, because if they're not playing force. So example, that might be you go trips and you run outside zone to the trips and run a bubble, and you look at that outside linebacker. If he sits there, throw the bubble. If he covers the bubble, hand it off. That's a very easy concept that you can run to put him in conflict. Safeties, you can get them in conflict a lot of times depending on play action type game where they're asked to come down and play run fits. Maybe there's a tight end or a wing or whatever's over there. You can get them in some conflicts up, or they roll down to cover three. They become kind of that force, also coverage guy. So we're going to try to do things to those guys to put them in bad spots.
I really am going to focus this year on kind of that unbalanced or wide receiver overload look. I think any time that you just put people in weird positions for such a balanced defense, it throws them off, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about going to a two back, but both of them on the same side. I think UNLV's Marion. I can't remember his last name, but he's got that go-go offense, and I think that's the 3-4 killer because what are you going to do? You can't play both, right? It takes your balanced defense where we can kind of handle anything either way. We've got a force guy, we've got a quarterback and a pitch guy. If you want to start looking at option stuff, um, you have everything answered because you've got balance. But all of a sudden, we just changed it. Like we don't care what you're bringing off the backside. We're going to sprint outside away from your blitzer, and then we're just going to outnumber you. So I think there's a lot of fun to be had there, just like going multiple back, even multiple H back. That's something I saw Wasso do last year that was a lot of fun. Was just, hey, we'll have an H back and what would look like regular 11 personnel, but now there's two of them. It's like, what do you do? Where do you put your guys? It's a lot to how you do your wing and tight end together. What do you do when your answer to one tight end is you put an outside backer down, but now there's two of them? So is your safety coming down too? Are you slanting away from that strength? So now you leave your weak side open. I just think there's so much fun to be had with trying to make them be unbalanced and then overload them where they don't want you. So that's kind of how we're going to go into it, I think, this year. Just in the spring, our defense is going to be a 3-front as well, and our kids have struggled blocking it, especially if they can kind of overload the weak side of a formation, and we don't have all the answers yet because it's spring install, right? So there's times there it does mess with your blocking rules. You look at inside or outside zone. If you just go covered to uncovered rules, well, if somebody's in a 5 or a 404, your entire O line is technically covered, so they're all you know exactly who's going to be double teamed in that situation. And then their eyes aren't on your backers, so you can kind of twist your backers up and stuff. So, lots of places there they can still give you fits. So we just have to think about that in our rules-based blocking game. Well, Coach, we kind of flew through the answers tonight. It's a little quicker than I expected.
Yeah.
But, some of them go that way. So last part here is just what not to do as a coach. You tell us our lesson for the night.
Yeah, this is just from personal experience for me. If you run some kind of unique offense, so if you're a spread guy, you can just tune out right now, maybe come back for the ads or whatever. But if you're a unique type offense, so you're a double wing offense, you're a wing T offense, you're a flex bone offense, you're a guy that runs something that is different than a gun T offense where you're running not just 10 or 20 personnel that everybody sees every week. You're running something a little different. Then my advice for you is to not spend a lot of time trying to guess how they're going to line up before you play them. Because what you'll find out is if you run one of these unique offenses, you have no idea what you're going to see when you go out the door. We've played the flex bone offense before. We played the wing T offense. We played the full house offenses. And our defensive coordinator is not just going to sit there in a 3-4 where the base adjusts if that's kind of what you major in. He's going to have some wrinkles for that game plan. And so my suggestion is instead of worrying about where they're going to be, focus on your rules and focus on their personnel. Because their personnel is still going to be out there. They just may be lined up in different spots. And so if you focus on your rules and you know who their best guys are to avoid and their guys that you want to go at, that's going to be much more beneficial than spending a lot of time, wasted time guessing on what you might see when in reality the odds are you're not going to see that.
Yeah. Very good point, Coach. I've heard you talk about that multiple times on the podcast now about you just get their junk defense. And so if you can just kind of play true rules, they're not very solid at what they do either this week. So you've still got the advantage, even though they can balance you up or bring all that weird pressure. So good points. To close out here, go talk to the guys over at A Sports, Mark and Ryan. Ryan, like I said, is the Oklahoma guy. But call Mark. Mark can get you no matter what state you're in, and get you guys like easy fundraising started today. There's a little, obviously the time and effort up front, but get that work done. And then, Kenny, what are you on, like year 7 or 8 now, just reaping the benefits off of one board, right? So
yeah, video board's been great. And it's worth it for sure. And like Daniel's been saying the whole time, we wouldn't be putting stuff out here that we didn't think actually could help you. And Mark he'll let you know one way or another if he can help you or not.
For sure. What sales are opening and closing? I think we forgot to talk about the book. You got the 90 power T formations. Is that
Yeah,
what it's called?
90 shotgun power formation. So that's been good. And
Shotgun power.
yeah, excited about that one. And it's been a good one, that formation bundle where I've got now you can have like 278 formations if you want them. So those are all available over at FB Coach Simpson.
There you
Of
go.
course, you got all the gun T stuff. You got all the headsets, which is free. That's over there as well. And so there's a lot of free and a lot of not as free, but still good information over at fbcoachsimpson.com. I am working on Team Themes Volume 4. So we'll try to have that out before the season hits. And of course, we've already kind of
Nice.
mentioned the O-Line Academy, which we're hoping to have out right after Memorial Day. It's going to be a really good, I think it's going to be a really, really cool little course to go through.
Awesome. Last time I'll mention the clinic here, sulfurstrong.coachesclinic.com. Jump over there and buy in today. Like I said, it is early bird pricing right now. That will go away pretty soon. I don't know an exact date, and it'll almost double the price. So it's worth it to go over. You can get your whole staff now for $20 a person or whatever. So jump over there, get that done. Social media, I am at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter/X. You can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. Kenny is at FB Coach Simpson on basically everything. Twitter and X, fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com is his email. And then, of course, fbcoachsimpson.com, which is where all the gun T stuff is housed, all the things that we've talked about tonight. The podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We want to thank you for being a listener in the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the shows. You'll always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.